Welcome to the deep dive. You're ready to dive deep into the DAX window function in Excel.
Always ready to dive into some data.
Awesome. So I know our listeners are ready to unlock some serious data analysis superpowers.
Yeah, window is super powerful. It can help you see those hidden trends and patterns that regular Excel functions just can't quite catch.
Exactly. So DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions, right?
Right. Think of it like a specialized language within Excel, just for manipulating and analyzing data.
Like a secret code for Excel experts.
Uh-huh. Kind of. But we're going to break it down so anyone can understand it.
Exactly. So before we get too deep in the technical weeds, can we just step back and explain what makes Windows so unique?
Okay, so imagine you're looking at sales figures over time, just staring at the daily numbers, It can be kind of overwhelming, up and down all over the place.
Yes.
Window lets you create a moving window, kind of a spotlight that shines on specific chunks of data, so you can smooth out all that noise and see the bigger trends.
Okay. So instead of getting lost in the daily ups and downs, we can see if sales are generally trending up or down over a week or a month.
Exactly. And that's just one example. We can use Window to analyze all sorts of data that changes over time. Think stock prices, website traffic, even your own fitness progress.
Okay, I'm starting to see the possibilities here. But how does it actually work? I'll be honest, the whole function thing can be a little intimidating.
Sure. Well, at its heart, the window function is all about defining the window itself. It's like setting the boundaries for our spotlight.
Okay, I'm following.
So we use parameters like from and to tell Excel where the window should start and end.
So from is the starting point of our window and to is the end?
Yep. And we can use specific values or even calculations to define those points. Say we wanted to analyze a 7-day moving average.
Okay.
Our from would be -6 to capture the 6 previous days, and to would be 0 to include the current day.
Gotcha. But here's where I get a bit tripped up. What determines if that window stays put or moves along with our data?
Good question. So that's where from heb type and to type come in. They control if our window boundaries are fixed or if they move relative to the current row we're looking at.
Okay, so could we walk through an example? I think seeing how those types actually work would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Let's stick with our 7-day moving average example. If we set from hem type to REL for relative, our window will always start 6 rows above the current row, creating that rolling average effect.
So as we move down our data, the window kind of slides along with us, always capturing the 7 most recent days.
Exactly. Now, if we used ABS for absolute Saruv, the window would stay fixed. Let's say we set from to 1 and to 7. No matter where we are in the data set, it would only look at those first 7 rows.
Okay. So REL gives us a moving window for trends, and ABS gives us a fixed window for comparing specific periods.
Exactly. And there's even more. We can control the data inside the window using other DAX functions too. We can sum the values, find the average, or even identify the highest or lowest values.
So window kind of sets the stage, and then other DAX functions come in to do the actual calculations on that specific chunk of data.
You got it. Think of window like the director, and the other functions are the actors. Window sets the scene, and the actors perform within those boundaries.
This is pretty cool. But can we maybe get back to our 7-day moving average example? Seeing it with a real formula would help make it click for me.
Sure. So say you've got a table with daily sales figures. The formula for the 7-day moving average would look something like this. Average, window 6, rel L, 0, 0, umbrella.
So for each day, Excel would create a window with the sales figures for that day, plus the 6 previous days, and then calculate the average.
Yep, and that average would show up in a new column right next to your daily sales data. As you move down the rows, the window shifts with you, always looking at the most recent 7 days.
This is really starting to make sense now. But before we get into all the ways we can actually use this, are there any potential pitfalls with window? Things we should be careful about?
Oh, definitely. There are a few things to watch out for. One of the most common mistakes is defining overlapping windows.
Overlapping windows? What does that mean?
Well, it's kind of like accidentally setting your window to be 8 days instead of 7. With the start and end points overlapping with the previous Windows calculations, it could really mess up your results and make your analysis less accurate.
So we got to be really precise when we're setting up those window boundaries. Any other tips for avoiding mistakes?
Always a good idea to test your formulas with a smaller data set first. It just helps make sure they're working the way you expect before you unleash them on a giant spreadsheet.
Good point.
And another tip is to visualize your results. A chart or a graph can often reveal errors or unexpected patterns that you might miss just by looking at numbers.
Visualizing data is always a good idea.
Right.
So we've covered the basic syntax, moving and fixed windows, and some tips for avoiding mistakes. But I'm curious about those optional parameters you mentioned earlier. Can we dig into those a bit more?
Absolutely. Those parameters give you even more control over your window, so you can do some really cool stuff. One of the most useful ones is the order by parameter.
Okay, tell me more about order by.
It lets you sort the data within each window before you do any calculations. Like, say you wanted to find the highest sale within each 7-day period.
Okay.
You could use order by to sort the sales from highest to lowest, and then use the max function to grab the highest value.
So we're not just looking at the raw data in the window, we can actually manipulate it before we do our calculations.
Yeah, it's super powerful. And order by just opens up so many possibilities for analyzing those trends and patterns within your data.
Wow, this is a lot to take in, but it's so fascinating. I think we should maybe pause here for a moment and let our listeners digest everything.
Sound good?
We've laid the groundwork, but there's still so much more to explore.
Definitely. We can dig into more of the practical stuff and real-world examples in the next part.
Sounds good to me. All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We're picking up where we left off with the DAX window function. Still trying to wrap my head around all the possibilities.
I know, right? It's a lot to take in.
So before the break, you were showing us how the order by parameter lets us sort the data inside our window before running the calculations. Can we maybe see another example of that in action?
Sure. Let's say we're tracking website traffic data. So we have a table with the date and the number of visits for each day.
Okay, trying to analyze trends in website traffic, classic stuff.
Right. Now, let's say we want to find the day with the highest traffic within each week. Using window and order by, we can easily do that.
All right, how would we set up the window for that?
Well, our from would be maggeter 6 to get the 6 previous days, and our to would be 0 for the current day, just like in that sales example we talked about. And we'd use rel for both from type and to type to make it a moving 7-day window.
Gotcha. Makes sense. But how would we use order by to actually find the day with the highest traffic?
So we would tell it to look at the column with our website traffic data and set the sort order to descending, meaning it would arrange the data in each 7-day window from highest traffic day to lowest.
Ah, I see. So the first row in each of those sorted windows would be the day with the highest traffic for that week.
Exactly. And then we could use the max function, which would just give us the value from that first row, the highest traffic day.
Wow. That's really slick. We're basically pinpointing the most important data point each week without manually sorting or anything.
Exactly. That's what window is all about. It just automates all those complex calculations, and it helps you find those insights that would be really hard to get otherwise.
Okay, I'm definitely getting a better feel for order by. But you also mentioned another optional parameter called partition by earlier. What does that one do?
Yes. Partition by. This one lets you divide your data into smaller groups or categories before applying the window function.
Can we walk through a real-world example for that one too?
Of course. Let's stick with our website traffic scenario. Imagine that you track traffic data from different sources like organic search, social media, and email marketing.
Okay, so instead of just looking at total website traffic, we want to see the trends for each of those sources individually.
You got it. Partition by lets you do that. You'd specify the column with your traffic source data as the partition by parameter.
So instead of having one big moving window for all the website traffic, we'd have separate windows for each traffic source.
Precisely. It lets you analyze the trends in each traffic source on its own, which gives you a much more detailed view of your data.
This is starting to feel like we're unlocking some secret Excel powers.
It's true. And the cool part is that you can actually combine partition by with other parameters like order by to do even more advanced analysis.
Okay, you're blowing my mind here. We went from a simple 7-day moving average to analyzing trends across all these different categories. It's amazing what this one function can do.
I know, right? We're only scratching the surface.
I think we need to take a step back for a second. We've seen how window works, but why is it such a big deal? What makes it so revolutionary for data analysis?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. We've covered a lot of technical stuff, but I need your help connecting the dots.
Think about traditional Excel functions for a minute. They're great for simple calculations, but not so much for data that changes over time or has different categories.
Okay, welcome back to the show. We're wrapping up our deep dive into the DAX window function. We've seen how it works, we've walked through examples, we've even touched on some of those advanced features.
But yeah, now it's time to answer that big question. Why is Windows such a game changer? Why should our listeners care?
I'm all ears. Like, we've gone through all the technical details, but help me connect the dots here. What's the big picture?
Well, think about like the limits of regular Excel functions. They're fine for like basic stuff, but they struggle when you're dealing with data that's always changing or that has different categories.
Right, because they can only look at like one cell or one row at a time.
Exactly. They just can't create those like dynamic windows that Windows gives us. It's like trying to watch a movie by only looking at individual frames. You're missing the whole story.
So Window gives us that context, that ability to see the data in motion, see how it all flows together.
Exactly. And that's where the real power comes in. We can see trends, patterns, relationships that would be so hard to spot otherwise.
Okay, I'm starting to get why this is such a big deal, but can we talk about like real world examples? How are people actually using Window to solve problems?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Like in finance, for example, traders use Window to analyze stock trends, find those buy and sell signals, manage risk. They can create moving averages to smooth out those price fluctuations and see if a stock is trending up or down.
So instead of like freaking out over every little price change, they're using Window to make smarter decisions more strategic.
Exactly. And it's not just finance. Marketing teams use it to track website traffic, understand customer behavior, make their campaigns better. They can analyze traffic trends for different products or see which marketing channels are working best.
It sounds like anytime you have data that changes over time, or if you can group it into categories, Window can help you find some serious insights.
Absolutely. Even researchers and scientists are using it, like to analyze data from experiments, clinical trials, track patient outcomes over time, compare different treatment groups.
Wow, so it's not just a tool for like data analysts or whatever, it's useful for a ton of different fields.
It is. And the best part, it's not that hard to learn once you get the basic ideas down. It's like adding a superpower to your Excel skills.
I like that. So if data is the new gold, then DAX functions like Window are the tools we need to mine it.
Uh-huh. I love it. And the cool thing is we're just scratching the surface. There's a whole world of DAX functions out there to explore.
Well, I'm definitely feeling inspired to dive in and learn more. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners who are excited to try out Window?
Just go for it. Don't be afraid to experiment. Start with the basics. Practice on some real data. Remember those tips we talked about for avoiding mistakes? And there are tons of online resources and communities where you can find help and get more ideas.
Awesome advice. And hey, maybe one day you'll be the DAX expert sharing your knowledge with the world.
Well, I think we have a future DAX superstar right here hosting this show.
You're too kind. Well, that's all the time we have for today. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the DAX Window function and that you feel ready to unlock those amazing insights hidden in your data. Thanks for listening, everyone.
See you next time.